Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here, part of Alan's celebration of life. I know he would be thrilled if he could see each and every one of you, so thank you so much for that. I just have a few remarks and then Debbie's going to take over. Alan embodied joy, generosity, kindness, strength, grit. He was my partner in life and the love of my life. He was a leader, a runner, a preservationist, a loyal friend, and a teacher. And above all, he was hilarious. He added levity to many moments. We met later in life after he had a long history with track and field, after he moved to Germany and came back. And just after he started teaching, he was working at Scripps Chula Vista, running the cardiac rehab program when we met. Though we wanted children, our timing was off. So we put our energy into working with community work, and we found it very rewarding. Actually, he was always teaching, and he was full of ideas, mostly good ones. He shared his enthusiasm for San Diego's historic places, for history, and the arts and crafts movement. He wrote posts, research reports, articles, chaired home tours, delivered presentations for organizations like Save Our Heritage Organization, Pasadena Heritage, and the National Arts and Crafts Conference that's held once a year in Grove Park, which is in Asheville, North Carolina. Our relationship was epic, and even though they call it the bonds of holy matrimony, I never felt more free or more loved. The way he shared his love and showed me his love was by teasing me incessantly. For example, when we were on our honeymoon, we came upon a bronze horse sculpture when we were in Milano. And he asked me to pose for it, like as if I was a horse. So I made this like rearing motion, and he took my picture and then proceeded to tease me about that for the next 26 years. This summer, he would come home from a morning run, and I'd still be laying in bed because he got up at 5 in the morning. And he would be home, and my window would be open, and he'd sing through the window. And he'd sing a Bruce Springsteen song, Jackie, Jackie, you're on the night shift. And he did that for mostly the whole summer, because I guess I was on the night shift because he had already had half a day already. All of it was playful and endearing to me. And though our time together was cut short, the work he did and shared endeared him to me and to you. And I realized that the numerous puns had something to do with it too. Alan's priorities were clear. Perhaps by wearing the Star of David on his chest while running for the Maccabi Union, embodied the Hebrew concept called Tikkun Olam. My friend Sheila shared with me that rabbis taught, you are not expected to repair the world, but neither are you excused from trying. Throughout our sometimes intense community work, we always drew strength from each other and always found solace at home. I'm grateful for Alan's mom, his dad's, his family, and the challenges that he endured because it made him into an extraordinary person. He was a principled leader, self-effacing, never taking himself too seriously, and genuinely encouraged others to succeed. I'd like to share a slightly modified passage from my mother's journal that reflects my desire for everyone who knew Alan to really appreciate the great guy that he was. It's called Remember Me. To the living I am gone. To the sorrowful I will never return. To the angry I was cheated, but to the happy I am at peace. And to the faithful I have never left. I cannot speak, but I can listen. I cannot be seen, but I can be heard. So as you stand upon a shore, gazing at the beautiful sea, remember me. As you look upon a flowering succulent and admire its simplicity, remember me. Remember me in your hearts, your thoughts, and in your memories of the times that we loved, the times we cried, the times we fought, and the times we laughed. For if you always think of me, I will never really be gone. Now it is likely, or maybe you're noticing, that Alan ran track at San Diego State in the late 1970s. After he coached men's cross country and track, and also served as assistant coach for the women's track team under Coach Fred LaPlante, it is safe to say that in the early 1980s, Alan knew every distance runner in San Diego State, men and women. One of those athletes was Debbie Chaddock. Debbie won the 1983 Conference Track Championship 10K, and later that year qualified for the first ever Women's Olympic Marathon Trials. In 1980, Debbie took part in an altitude training study that Alan designed and led in Mammoth for his master's thesis. Debbie loved running in Mammoth so much that she spent the next 2 summers training for her cross-country seasons. I'm pleased to introduce you to Alan's friend, Debbie Chaddock, who will be our MC for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Thanks to all of you again for coming today. When I lose someone who's important to me, my heart plays host to 2 guests. The first guest is grief. Grief barges in immediately, usually with wine and several large suitcases. Grief clearly intends to stay a while. The other guest is gratitude. Gratitude needs an engraved invitation and several follow-up calls before finally showing up. Gratitude is the guest who helps clean up grief's empty wine bottles, nurses my pity party hangover, and reminds me how damn lucky I am the person I lost was part of my life. It sucks that Alan was taken from us too soon. He gave us so much, and he had so much left to give. So let's allow our hearts to welcome the grief. At the same time, let's embrace the gratitude by celebrating Alan's life and how lucky we all are to have known him. Like Alan, I too was happy not to finish last in my first high school track race. I worked hard to improve and ended up running on the women's cross-country and track teams at San Diego State University. And it was there that I met Alan, a former Aztec athlete himself, and an exercise physiology major. As part of their studies, Alan and his fellow students recruited university distance athletes to participate as subjects in their research. Much of this research centered around measuring our aerobic capacity, anaerobic threshold, and lactic acid buildup as we ran to the point of exhaustion on a treadmill. The means to record our pulse, respiration, and blood pressure in this pre-wireless era was to use thin cables to connect us to temperature gauges, pulse meters, and other devices. These cables swayed and bounced awkwardly in a chaotic fashion as we ran. But the pièce de résistance was the oversized breathing tube we had to hold in place with our jaw. I remember thinking, this must be what it feels like to be a vacuum cleaner. If a vacuum cleaner ever had to run a 5-minute mile on a treadmill. Every 60 seconds, Alan and his other sadistic classmates would gleefully increase the speed of the treadmill by a minute per mile. This continued until our cerebral cortex could no longer override our brain's desire not to die. Just before we grabbed the support bars and jumped so both feet landed along the static outer edges of the treadmill, we gave the stop signal, which was to raise a finger. Perhaps you can guess which one. It speaks to Alan's charm, professionalism, and personality that, despite his inflicting such torture on us in the lab, outside the lab, we all liked Alan very much. He was a great coach who understood intrinsically, both from his academic studies and personal athletic experience, what runners needed to do to reach their potential, and even go beyond what they thought their potential was. Alan also modeled the importance of life balance. After a week of intense workouts, keeping up with our studies, and a day-long track competition, our team was ready for a party. Ah, youth. One of my favorite things about our post-meet celebrations was watching Alan drop the facade of professionalism as he became a kindred party animal who loved his beer, danced like a maniac, and transformed all of us into Bruce Springsteen fans. Thank you, Alan. I will always be grateful for how you enriched those crucial formative years of my life. And now I'd like to bring up Alan's first cousins, Michael and Nick. Michael and Nick Buckmiller spent the better part of their early childhood in Palatine, Illinois, before their mom, Deborah, and dad, Joe, unluckily moved them from Southern California years before the Cubs actually won a World Series. But moving back meant that Michael and Nick were lucky enough to go to lots of family get-togethers and get to know their cousin Alan. Way back then, Alan and his first cousins, their mom Deborah included, went by the moniker the Boston Brats. The meaning of brat seems to be pretty much what brat means today, at least from the cousin's perspective. For those just catching up, the Dictionary of Pop Culture defines brat as someone who, quote, celebrates individuality, a carefree attitude, often with a hint of sass and love of fun. Welcome, Boston Brats, Michael and Nick.
Hello, I'm Michael Buckmiller, and this is my brother, Nick. We are two of the so-called Boston Brats, and proud members of Alan's extended and, let's face it, delightfully eccentric family. Today we have the impossible honor of presenting a tribute to Alan. How do you even begin to condense a life as full as his into a few words? Alan was a tramp, as is the term for fans of Bruce Springsteen. For Alan, music was a shared celebration and a powerful reminder of how art connects us all. I love talking with him about legendary shows that he'd been to, like seeing the Clash live or being in the audience for the boss himself. Alan probably would have approved of me calling him a brat or a tramp, flashing that mischievous look that he'd give whenever he was about to drop some sarcastic remark, something that's practically coded into our family DNA. You'll hear more about Alan as an athlete, a coach, and a lifelong runner, but the two of us always spoke as sports fans. Whether it was the Lakers, Bears, Padres, or Chicago Cubs, there was bound to be a lively discussion. When the Cubs came to Petco, we'd always catch a game together, reminiscing about eternal hope and heartbreak. We shared the extreme joy of the Cubs finally winning that World Series, and laughed about how Wrigley Field could really use the help of Powers Plumbing. Alan was a born teacher even when you hadn't asked for a lesson. He was constantly sharing interesting bits of knowledge, whether over dinner, on one of his walking tours, or even just a Facebook post. As our own family historian, he loved to tell us what my mom was like as a child. She was another in a long line of dry wit and sarcasm, as it turns out. His insight into our family lore was a gift that he gave us, rooting us in where we came from and providing context for who we are and perspective on the world around us. When we meet up, he'd often give us his take on classic films that he and Janet had watched that weekend, whether it was a noir thriller or a cult B movie. He always found something to appreciate. And when it came to architectural history, well, let's just say that he could spin a full story from an old doorknob, something only Alan could do so charmingly. Alan was also an artist at heart. Whether he was photographing historic homes, chronicling his travels, or serving as the official photographer at my brother Nick's wedding, he had a keen eye. He saw beauty in what others might pass by and devoted himself to preserving and honoring his unique corner of the world. Of course, with Alan came Janet, who we adore. Janet's kindness, humor, can-do spirit has endeared her to all of us. Together, they made a team that enriched our family in countless ways, and we're grateful for every moment that they shared with us. So as we gather here today to honor Alan, let's remember him not only as a teacher, athlete, historian, and friend, but as someone who made the most of life. Alan was funny, he was kind, he was filled with wonder. I imagine he's looking at us now, probably thinking I could have picked up the pace or been a little funnier. But most of all, I think he'd want us to hold on to these moments, to keep sharing these stories, and to remember him with the same warmth that he gave us. So thank you, Alan. We miss you, we love you, and we promise to keep your memory alive. Thank you.
Manuel, okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Manuel Monroy was Alan's favorite running partner for many years. Alan would often buy the Sunday paper and they would read it during their training. They always discussed movies and some days listened to a small transistor radio years before the Sony Walkman hit the market. Manuel believes this multitasking was Alan just trying to liven up their training. So, Manuel, if you're ready to come on up and share some of your thoughts and memories. Thank you.
Hello. As she said, I knew Alan. I met Alan in 1970. And the year before that, I wanted to play a sport in high school. But as my friends know very well, I wasn't very coordinated. So the last sport available was running. And so I went out for the cross-country team in 1970. And Alan was a senior, I was a sophomore. And he was the captain. He pretty much, we had a coach who was a field event coach, but he took over the cross-country team. So he didn't know much about how to train distance runners. So Alan pretty much trained us. And that's what he would do. And I was in the JV, he was the varsity big guy. And in fact, we would play basketball games. Once we went to after cross-country track came along, he would, to try to get us to be more bonding, he would make up basketball games and things like that. But we really didn't become friends because he was a senior and a sophomore. But after he graduated, I was gonna run that summer to get ready for my junior year, and he was running that summer to get ready to run at Southwestern College. So I'm running towards Chula Vista. He's running back on Chula Vista, and this is Alan. He hides behind this skinny little tree, pretending like, oh, I'm gonna hide so he doesn't see me. Obviously, I saw him, and I stopped, and I said, "Is that you? What are you doing?" Because I was always very serious. I still am. I'm the quiet, serious one. And he was the jokester. And so he pretended like I'm hiding from Manuel. So right then we decided, well, why don't we run together this summer? help each other. And that's when we became friends. We started hanging out that summer. He took me to the beach, tried to teach me surfing, and I said no. I said Mexicans don't surf. I said you can try it. And I said no. And so to liven up the summer, because we weren't working, we started going to the movies. And I don't like classic movies. He took me to my first Casablanca movie, my first viewing. I hadn't, like, what is this Casablanca? So he takes me, I enjoyed it, and I said, now I have to take you to my movies, and I took him to see Foxy Brown, Shaft. And he said, what is this? So we kind of opened up our different cultures to each other, you know. And so after that, we kept in touch, kept running together and stuff. And he started running at San Diego State, and that's where I met some of his other buddies. I see BW over there with the mustache. And so I met his friends, and then I said, well, then I introduced him to my friends, because growing up in National City, it was mostly Mexican, Latino community. He was the only white guy there. And we called him, where's the white guy? So, but he didn't care. That was his nature. He was like, well, you're not getting rid of me. So I want to hang out with you guys because you guys seem like you have some fun. And so through him, another mutual interest, I became friends with Ross. Ross is right over there. And he started hanging out with us. I said, you have to be my friends from the South Bay. So he liked hanging out with us. To this day, I'm not sure why. So we took him to Tijuana a couple of times. I think he was a little nervous. But we took good care of him. To this day, he says, I kept him from harm's way in Tijuana because the police would leave him alone. So they see this, and he looked the part, this innocent white guy dressed like a white guy. And they would walk up to him and say, what are you doing here? And we'd go, no, he's with us. Oh, okay. So every now and then he would thank me, like, thanks for... So anyway, so that became like a lifelong bond between us, and all the friends that we shared, the running friends and the other friends from the South Bay who weren't runners, but they were artists, mechanics, and things like that. So we kind of combined. We actually nicknamed him Vato, which in the Mexican community means like he's one of us. I go, hey, Vato, hey, what's going on, Vato? So we nicknamed him Vato, even though he was white. I think he liked that. I think he liked that.
He liked it.
Yeah.
I know he did.
Yeah. And but as far as like to liven things up, because the runs could get a little boring, and but he would buy the newspaper. It had to be the Sunday paper, but we read it as we ran. We didn't sit and read it. He portioned out the sections. And then we tried to run, and I'm like, what are you doing? Because I said, I was the serious one. What are you doing? But then I tried to read it. And then one day he shows up with a transistor radio. And I said, what is this? We're training. I'm serious. We're training. What are you doing with the radio? And this was around the time that he became a big Bruce Springsteen fan. And a song came on the radio. And he goes, quiet, this is Bruce Springsteen. And I said, well, who is this Bruce Springsteen that you speak of? You know, different cultures again, different music. And so I listened to it. I go, yeah, that's okay. That's all right. And I said, but change the station. I don't like the music. And then a Barry White song came on. And I said, leave it there. That's Barry White. And he says, who's Barry White? So I think that's why we became such close friends, because we were teaching each other to be tolerant and enjoy and not be afraid to try new things, you know. And then of course the parties. Once he started running a San Diego State, he threw some really nice. We call them track parties because most of the people there were athletes, and they were a lot of fun. But we didn't like the music he played at the beginning, so we would At some point, when he wasn't looking, we'd take the record off and put in some Oingo Boingo or some B-52s. I go, now the party can start. Because he wanted to play Bruce Springsteen and other stuff. I go, no. And so you hear that, they go, okay, now the party can start. So, but that was Alan. He was always looking. I never really saw him serious. Well, I mean, yeah, of course he was serious, but he always tried to liven things up with his humor, his sense of humor. Big prankster. His nickname for me, at the time there was a risque movie out called Emmanuel, with an E at the beginning. And my name is Manuel. So he would call me Emmanuel. Every time, "Where's Emmanuel?" And I would say, "No, don't do that." But he wouldn't stop. The more I didn't like it, the more he said it.
Right.
Did he tell you that he used to call me that?
But I got the same thing with the horse thing.
Yeah.
The more I didn't like it, the more he said it.
Yeah, he would love to prod me. And him being the lively person also, he would kind of get us in trouble. Like one time, cars, in those days, cars didn't like runners. I guess they still don't. But they used to cut us off. And we had to go around them and stuff like that. And one time, Alan had had enough. And this car pulls up, he stops us, and he runs over the car. He just stepped over the car. Kept going. I went around, I started sprinting. And I said, "What was that all about?" He said, I've had it with these cars. He went right up and over that thing. Just like a... So that was Alan. Yeah, and then when he became friends with Ross is an artist. And Alan liked arts and crafts, as you well know. So they collaborated on a few things about how to decorate his house, his apartment and stuff. He would go... Ross used to work at a place called Aaron Brothers. So he would go there, and Alan would help him pick out stuff for his apartment. He would, "You'll like this one." Because Alan was still learning, but he has a good eye. So, but that was Alan in the early days, and I guess he didn't change much. But I'm glad he got into the preservation and the historical societies and all that. I'm seeing on Facebook all the stuff he was really doing. So yeah, he will be missed, really. I still can't, we were so close, because he was like a brother to me. And I still can't believe that he's gone. And I miss him. So, thank you. I also took him to Tijuana to run races too. He didn't know how to do that. I said, "I'll take you. Let's go." And he did well.
Thanks, Manuel. Our next speaker is Mike Orkin. Mike met Alan through Janet, as Mike and Janet were high school friends who both moved from the Chicago area to Southern California. As teachers, Mike, his wife Blanca, and Alan found they had a lot in common. Their shared sense of purpose and also a zany sense of humor. Mike will now read a speech that Alan delivered in 2013 when he was inducted into the Southwestern College Hall of Fame.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here and to read Alan's Hall of Fame speech, and I'm going to read it verbatim. Let me know if I'm going too soft or too loud. I'd like to thank my family and friends for being here tonight. Bruce and Elena, Nick and Judy, Leah and Frank, Jenny and Ming, Karen and John, the Hall of Fame, and my former coach Rich and Kathy Gearing, and my wife Janet. Coach Gearing was a great recruiter. He showed up at my home in National City about a week before school was going to start and asked if I was coming to Southwestern College. I said, "Yes, Coach," and he thanked me and left. He was a heavy sales guy. During my time at Southwestern College, I learned a lot about nutrition. Coach Gearing introduced me to Hamburger Helper. And at Mount Sank Relays, we had Hamburger Helper and spent the night in his RV. Travel budget funds were limited in those days. At least we had the money to dine at fine restaurants such as Sir George's, Smorgasbord. Let's hear it for the Hush Puppies. Life was harder back then. My first semester, I relied on Louis Tejada for a ride to school. Louis wasn't a very good student, and some days he didn't show up to pick me up. So I nearly flunked out of school. Coach Gearing kept me eligible for track by having me take health education credit by exam over the winter break, which ironically is the very subject that I have taught at Southwest College for 19 years. During my second semester, I rode a bus 1 hour each way from National City to campus. I noticed that some of my students today drive better cars than I have. Students are not the same anymore, I guess. For my sophomore year, I drove a late 1950s Rambler station wagon that I purchased for $50. It had push-button transmission and shook like hell if I went over 40 miles an hour up Otay Lakes Road. My teammates called it the Tonka toy, but never gave me any gas money, the cheapskates. I was used to being on the good track teams at Sweetwater High. My junior year, we were Metro champions in track and CFI champions in cross country. I remember Coach Gearing was ecstatic my freshman year when we finished the dual meet season at 5 wins and 5 losses. In order to achieve this, I remember running the 880, a mile, and 3 mile in one dual meet on a sandy track. I ran 29 races during the 1972 season, yet Valley Coleman was our Ironman. I guess Valley ran 30 races. Other SWC teammates included Earl Bass, who I thought was an old man because he was 21 at the time, and a Vietnam vet, Greg Gorsuch, Tony Phillips, and Santiago Santoya. Coach Gearing went to Germany on a sabbatical my sophomore year. I later learned that sabbatical was German for drink beer. Our Apache sprinters were so slow that I pleaded with Coach Braun to please let me run the 220 leg in a relay at Mount Sac. I ran a 23.7, nearly as fast than our best sprinter. Later at state, I would be surrounded by world-class sprinters and never ran a 200 meter again. I graduated SWC with 8 school records, some which will never be broken, such as the indoor mile and 2 mile records. It's good to have obscure events. The indoor meets are now history. I ran a 4:17 mile as a freshman, barely improving to a 4:16 my sophomore year in a season where I was sick at the end of the season. I accepted the biggest scholarship offer and transferred to Boise State after my Apache days were over. I didn't stay long at Boise State, although maybe I should have, as the XE team ran at the NCAA XE Nationals that fall and against the great Steve Prefontaine, my hero at the time. At SDSU, Coach Dick Hill was our head coach. My distant coaches were former Great American Milers Gary Winsiger and Olympian Bob Wheeler, who passed away a few years ago. I was on some great teams at state. My senior year, we were 10-1 in dual meets, barely losing to top 20 ranked Berkeley. I remember walking around Berkeley after a meet in 1975 and seeing dudes walking down the street smoking joints as big as cigars. That was some crazy stuff for someone who grew up in South Bay. My junior year, I ran a 4.07 mile and was an all PCAA in the mile. My senior year, I ran a 4.04 mile at the West Coast Relays at Fresno on a slow dirt track. I then ran 3 years at the Maccabee Union Track Club. I ran under the 4:10 for the mile over 20 times and ran against some of the great milers of the 1970s, such as Steve Scott, NCAA champions Mark Schilling and Paul Cummings, national champion Len Hilton, Steve Prefontaine, and Oregon's teammate Mark Faden. Olympian Duncan McDonald, Olympian medalist Rod Dixon from New Zealand, and NCAA XC champion from New England, Nick Rose. I even beat a few when they had really terrible days. Running taught me many lessons, including determination, perseverance, and respect. I might have only been a 4.30 miler in high school. I might have not had the talent of others, but no one would work harder than I did. I also learned that respect must be earned and never given. I respected my opponents, but I feared none. Pre-taught that running the world to run with guts and to give it your all you got. I remember watching Steve Scott ran a 3.56 mile at the old San Diego Indoor Games against the greatest milers in the world, including John Walker and Philbert Babe, having to run against him a few weeks later. I was a 4.04 miler, but there is a big difference between a 3.56 and a 4.04 in the mile. Steve would go on to break the American record in the mile 3 miles, and run in 4 or 5 Olympics. I will never forget teammate Steve Edcuff yelling at me with 300 meters to go in the mile, take him, you got him. It was Steve and me at about 15 meters ahead of the pack, which included Ralph Cerna, one of the greatest high school distance runners in history. Now, I knew Steve was going to win the race, but I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to earn it. I wasn't going to just lay down for him. I pushed him. But I also paid a price, fading in the last 100 meters, as Cerna and Tom Lutz passed me. I could have laid back and ran with the pack, but that wasn't my style. That was not who I was, nor who I am today. Push the pace. Push yourself. No one can say that they tried harder. Never give up. No one can take that away from you. After a poor performance in LA, I ran intervals at state track in dark after the team bus returned home. There was a track party that night, but I didn't feel like I deserved to celebrate until I ran off the sins of failure, sprinting 200 meter after 200 meter by myself. I also had some fun races for the Miccobee Union. One time I ran the mile relay at an invitational meet in LA. We had only 3 guys, so the coach said to finish the race after running the 3rd leg. Now, my first 2 teammates happened to be members of the 1976 4x400 U.S. Olympic team, Maxie Parks and Benny Brown. As I waited for the handoff, I mentioned to the guy next to me that I was not a sprinter and I was just doing this for a workout. He said that he wasn't a sprinter either, so I asked him when he did. He said, I'm a pole vaulter. I asked him his name, and he said Earl Bell, as in the world record holder. Earl was pretty tall and pretty fast, and he whipped my butt. I later coached distance runners at SDSU. I coached Lynn Kanuka, who won the bronze medal for the 3,000 meter at the 1984 Olympics, and Graham Fell, who ran in several Olympics for Canada. I also coached Gail Devers her senior year at Sweetwater. Gail, of course, ran in a few Olympics and won 3 Olympic gold medals. I've come a long way from placing 5th in the C1320 Metro Finals for Sweetwater in 1969. Southwestern College was and has been a second home to me, and I was fortunate to have great coaches like Rich Gehrig and Tom Brunn, and lucky to have a great chairperson in Walt Justice, who played football at the state during the same time. Teaching all these years at SWC has always been very special to me, and being in our Hall of Fame is a dream come true. Thank you. Thanks to my mom for always supporting my athletic and academic careers. I could have not accomplished my achievements in track and life without her. Thanks, Mom. To Alan.
Thanks, Mike. I'd now like to introduce Alana Coons. In 2000, Alana was the first person Alan and Janet met at their very first Save Our Heritage organization annual meeting. And over the years, they became not just great work friends, but close friends who shared a love for San Diego history. Welcome, Alana.
little shorter. I think so. Can you hear me? After hearing all of these wonderful speakers, I really feel Alan's presence here. I love all the stories, and I heard many of them from Alan, so it really brings it home for me. As I reflect on Alan's life, it is impossible to sum up everything he meant to myself and to Bruce, to Soho, and to so many of you here. Alan wasn't just a devout preservationist. He was a beloved friend and an energetic leader, deeply committed to our mission of saving historic places. Alan and Bruce and I shared a bond that ran deep both as preservationists and as friends. Over nearly 25 years, Alan's dedication to Soho and our mission was steadfast. Whether he was writing articles, chairing and leading home tours with his characteristic energy, or rolling up his sleeves to dive into committee work, he gave his all. And he did it with a smile, a joke, or a clever bit of trivia that you never knew you needed to know. We were real buddies, Alan and I. He was the kind of friend who was always there, whether to brainstorm a new project, share the latest thing he'd learned on a historical topic, or just lend an ear to you in a dark hour. And while we didn't share an interest in sports, he still managed to influence my perspective on this too. When Bruce and I attended his induction into the Southwestern College Athletic Hall of Fame, I saw sports in a whole new way. It wasn't just about the game, it was about character building and community. He opened my eyes to that side of sports, and I have never forgotten it. That was Alan's influence, shaping things in big ways like the creation of the Mission Hills Historic District, and in smaller ways that would stick with you. During the pandemic, we began long phone calls every 6 weeks or so, and that ritual became important. Alan, with his carefulness and empathy, was always up to date on the latest vaccine news, sending us information on COVID numbers and other details, and those calls helped us stay connected when we were all otherwise isolated. In fact, Alan kept track of our vaccination dates better than we did. He was always up to date with the latest information, reminding us of the things that kept us safe. And because we trusted each other's caution so much, we were able to enjoy many lunches and dinners post the first year of pandemic. We were able, when the four of us, Alan, Janet, and Bruce and I, got together, it was endless conversation and laughter. We talked about anything and everything for hours and hours and hours. Alan's sense of humor was ever present, and I could always count on him to make me laugh. Those gatherings will always be some of our most cherished memories. Alan and I shared a bond as educators. He was a professor, and I'd been Soho's education director. And we had endless conversations about our ideas and strategies, the best way to connect with others, how to inspire passion for preservation. He nicknamed Bruce, David Swearens, and Eric Hansen, who are all here today, three wise men, coming to them with questions about historic architecture, preservation, or San Diego's arts and crafts movement. He loved learning from others just as much as he loved sharing his own knowledge. He was always a teacher, always sharing what he knew, whether with a classroom full of students where he taught physical education, but always managed to add a preservation topic to his curriculum. He would share those classroom lessons with me so I could see what he was doing, how he was doing the work. And once he retired, he would do the same through his social media posts and Zoom lectures that reached far and wide. He was probably the most active member of Soho's Events and Education Committee, where we would spend even more hours, as he was always up for hashing out ideas. Alan was the kind of ambassador every organization would love to have. He never missed reading an issue of the Soho Ease News. He would always have feedback for me, and he would never fail to tell me how much he appreciated the work and care that went into each issue. I could count on him to respond to every Soho social media post, either with a comment or just a simple like.
Dean Glass, who's here, who helps manage our social media, told me earlier today how Alan was always the first, always the first to comment on one of our posts. And it's something so many of us have already come to miss. There's a big gap there now, a silence where his daily presence used to be, his ever-present cheerleading. It's only now that we all truly feel the weight of his presence now that he's gone. He loved helping Bruce research historic houses. He would get an extra kick out of finding some fact or story that Bruce hadn't known of. So Alan, it was just one more way of contributing, of showing his dedication to Soho and to our shared mission. Alan's curiosity and enthusiasm was boundless, fueling so much of what he did. His legacy is forever etched in the streets of Mission Hills, where his vision and persistence helped establish the first historic district of its kind. He and Janet put their heart into protecting that neighborhood. Alan, Bruce and I will miss you more than words can say. Soho will miss you. Our community has lost not just an advocate, but a friend whose steadfast support made many accomplishments possible. There will forever be a space in our hearts where your voice, your jokes, and your spirit echo. Thank you, Alan, for everything you gave us and for making all of our lives better, kinder, and fuller. We will miss you forever, my friend.
Thank you, Alana. That was wonderful. Our next speaker is Lori Shaw. Lori and Alan had a standing appointment every 3 months for over 20 years. Lori will read a speech that Alan gave in 2016 after receiving recognition from the San Diego Historic Resources Board for co-writing the Mission Hills Images of America book. Lori.
Hello. So I'm honored to read Alan's words for you today. This was an award that they won for the book that they wrote, Mission Hills. We would like to thank the Historic Resources Board for our award today. Our book was truly a labor of passion. We started collecting ephemeral photographs and other historic documents of Mission Hills shortly after we moved into our bungalow 15 years ago. We turned my minor obsession with collecting local history into a book. We had a number of items lined up that helped make a possible undaunting task possible, including a list of Mission Hills old-timers after an early oral history project, Soho friends who graciously shared their historic photos with us. Having served as the chair for past home tours led us to other historic photos, a historic Mission Hills Facebook page, which was where Arcadia found us. A 1923 Powers Plumbing building became the book's de facto headquarters. Flyers were posted. Our 100-year Powers celebration street fair asked visitors to rate our possible cover photos. Longtime residents came in and Janet scanned their vintage photos during work hours. We had a story to tell. A narrative to describe our vibrant, historic 100-year-old community. We wanted to have photos that would give the reader a sense of our rich architectural history, including homes by architects and builders such as Cliff May, Mead and Rickwell, William Templeton Johnson, Melhorn and Rigdon, most of whom also lived in Mission Hills. We wanted to paint a visual image of what a creative community we were by including artists such as writer and poet John Vance Cheney, and the White Bungalow writers who met at a bungalow during the 1915 exposition. We are proud that the vast majority of our photos came from private collections. The majority of the photos in our book have rarely been seen. We found vintage postcards and antique glass negatives on eBay, vintage book images from a history center decession sale, and from estate sales. We had a decent photo of the old number 3 streetcar, but we found a much better one at the Paul Klauber estate sale featuring his future wife and her San Diego High classmates in 1936 with a streetcar going past them in the background. We managed to get that into the book after the deadline. As preservationists, we also want our book to gently send a message of the importance of preservation to a community's identity by including photos of lost Mission Hills. From demolished, simple, but well-crafted craftsman homes that are now gone forever, to the 1912 Milo C. Treat Mansion on Sunset Boulevard, which served as the art museum during the war years, that should never have been demolished, to remembering our nearly forgotten 1875 cemetery that now is a community park. We hope that through our book, the stories of those who came before us will be remembered. We also hope that our book will help today's residents realize how important our older buildings and homes are, and to cherish and love them, restore and preserve them, and designate them. Thank you, Alan, for everything you've given us. We will miss you.
Like Alan, David Goldberg is a San Diego native with a deep appreciation for preserving San Diego's rich culture and heritage. They met through Soho volunteer work, where they both contributed various preservation efforts. Today, David will speak as the president of Soho.
I'm still stunned by the loss of Alan. The first words that came out of my mouth when I learned of his passing were that he was only 71. Full disclosure, I turned 71 in a couple of weeks. 71 is not that old by today's standards, especially for someone who lived a healthy, full, and productive life. Furthermore, Alan had so much more to contribute, which makes his passing all but much harder to accept. I first met Alan 20 or so years ago. He had gotten involved in preservation later in life than many of us, but when he got involved, he jumped into it headfirst with a passion bordering on a religious fervor. As Soho's executive director, Bruce Kuhn, would say, Alan had preservation in his DNA. For preservation, that is about as high a compliment as you can get. Not only was Alan committed to the protection and preservation of our historic building stock, he had a passion for architecture history, period furniture, art objects and design, historic neighborhoods, and the philosophical underpinnings of the arts and crafts movement that few possess. He's continually reading, researching, writing, and expanding his knowledge base, and sharing what he learned on social media and with anyone in earshot. I recently learned that he would weave the subject of preservation into conversations and lectures with friends, colleagues, and students in the sports world. Talk about going the extra mile. All this may not have always been fully appreciated by those of you who got an unexpected lesson in historic preservation. As a preservationist, I will say, it was good for you. Alan was a great organizer and advocate. In addition to talking a good game, which he did, Alan walked the talk and put his beliefs into action. After moving to Mission Hills in 2001, Alan and Janet, his wife, soulmate, and life partner, became increasingly concerned with the demolition of historic buildings. Approaching the city of San Diego with their concerns, they battled an assortment of bureaucratic obstacles and were told the city couldn't do much because of budget deficits. Some things never change. In response, Alan asked Historic Resources Board staff, why don't you let us do the research report? Somewhat surprisingly, they agreed. This created a partnership that reduced costs for the city and opened the door for a community-led initiative that would preserve local historic resources. The report was completed on time in 2004, and the Mission Hills Historic District, the first residential historic district in the United States, was officially designated in 2007. Alan also played a key role in the founding of Mission Hills Heritage, arguably the most effective neighborhood preservation group in San Diego. Through his efforts, developers began coming to the table and started taking citizen input into account. That was a huge step forward.
He and Janet organized home tours, member parties, walking tours, which provided a funding stream for the organization as well as educational outreach. Mission Hills has retained a greater degree of architectural and historic integrity because of his work and dogged determination. This is an important part of his legacy, a physical manifestation of his activism, and something that we should all be grateful for. Around 2000, Alan joined Soho, quickly becoming one of its most active members. Through the years, he ably served on the board, became involved in various committees, played key roles in organizing events and home tours, including finding homes, never an easy task, lecturing, writing articles for the Soho publications, advocating for preservation in front of Historic Resources Board meetings and the City Council, acting as a Soho ambassador, and representing Soho in front of community groups and like-minded organizations in and out of San Diego. Alan knew of what he spoke. He didn't mince words, he had no time for nonsense, and he didn't suffer fools lightly. Alan was one of the best preservationists I've ever known. As an aside, I've been a Soho member for nearly half a century. I've met a lot of great preservationists. He made a difference. He pushed the ball forward in important and meaningful ways. He's a friend, and he's going to be dearly missed. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you who've shared those special stories. We now open the floor to those of you who wish to share your special memories. So you can come on up to the podium anytime you like. If you happen to come up at the same time as somebody else, you can stand in one of the on-deck positions and wait for your turn. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Marty Castillo. My husband and I have known Alan since we went to National City Junior High School. During that time, Alan was active in track. He was also on our journalism. He participated in the annual. And he was the same person the way he was now as in junior high. Always had an opinion. Part of Alan's competitive spirit, he would tease my husband. He would always say that he could outdistance him in the mile, but that Mike could smoke him in the 200-yard dash. While at Sweetwater High, he was active in football, track, and cross country. Alan had a very competitive spirit, and he loved to joke around that cross country was always better than football. He made all Metro League, and he wore his Letterman's jacket with pride. He even wore it to our reunions sometimes. He was involved in the Letterman's Club, the House of Representatives. He was also on the German Club and on our float committee. And his nickname at Sweetwater was the Big A. I think he gave it to himself. Alan served on our class reunions, committees, and during the reunions, Alan was always very gracious, and to all the people who would come out of town, he could walk the room and talk the room. For one of the fundraisers that he helped us with, we did a walking tour at the Mission Park, and I helped him with one of the last tours. And there was a young couple I had talked to, and it was their first date. It was one of those internet connections. Well, we were doing the walking tour, and Alan was during the tour, he was talking about the spooky legends of the park. Well, the girl got so traumatized that she ran, and I yelled at Alan. I said, "Hey, you're the cross-country star. You better go get her." She didn't return. Many alumni from our class, from all over our United States, Texas, Florida, they send condolences to you, Janet. And one last thing. Alan wrote, we all had to write an ambition in the annual, right? Well, Alan's ambition, he wrote, was to make the most of myself. Well, Alan, you finished that race at the top of your class. Rest in peace, Fred Devlin.
Hi, I'm Joe Brisky. I've known Alan for quite a while. It's really great that we're gathered here to honor Alan. It's difficult to find the right words at times like this, but I feel it's important to share all these memories of Alan, surrounded by his family, his friends, Janet. I met Alan nearly 50 years ago. In 1975, I transferred to San Diego State, and I had no idea that the introduction I was going to get from Coach Dick Hill and a guy named Pete Paps would be the start of a friendship that would last over a half century. Alan had already been at State for a year after transferring from Boise. And like many of us who were drawn to track and field, we bonded over our love of the sport. But what really set Alan apart for me was his passion for the sport, especially middle distance running. We both read track and field news like it was the Bible, religiously. Alan's focus was always on times, the mile times, the distances. He had some knowledge of the sprints and basically no knowledge of the jumps or throws, and I was a thrower. He would laugh about it. He'd be the first to admit that it wasn't his area of expertise, but distance running, that was his domain. I probably saw almost every race Alan ran from 1975 through 1979, at outdoor and indoor meets, always competing with heart and determination. I remember Alan, Mike Avery, and Rick Lord running for State in 1976. Week after week, they would alternate winning the mile, and their times went better every week from 4:08 to 4:07 to 4:06. It was like clockwork, and every one of them would share in that next week's win. It was really fun to watch them push each other to faster times and keep improving each week. In 1978, I watched Alan achieve his lifetime best running for Maccabi at Long Beach State. I did get to race Alan one time. I was weighing about 235 pounds, and we raced in all-comers 400 hurdles. Well, I can tell you this, I took him neck and neck to the finish. The last hurdle seemed like a mountain to both of us, but Alan did beat me. We broke 63, so it's not bad for a guy running at that point. I'll never forget the bus trips to meets, particularly we would go, a lot of meets were at Long Beach State. And it was Alan's tradition that whenever in a bus or in a car, his trademark middle finger salute every time we passed Avenue of the President in honor of Richard Nixon. We shared many laughs during those trips. Alan tried to play spades, but he was a terrible card player. Terrible. One of Alan's highlights when he was racing was to be the rabbit in the Jack in the Box indoor meet at Sports Arena. He was racing in the Premier Mile event, and I believe Eamon Coughlin and Steve Scott were in the race. Alan finished his 2 laps, took him through the pace, and that was the real highlight in front of 14,000 people cheering. Alan stepped off the track to all the glory of leading those athletes through a fast time. Off the track, Alan and I shared some good times. We both were history majors, as second major at State, and we had a history of film class, which we spent every Tuesday and Thursday evening watching old films, and Alan was right at home. We also shared some unusual jobs together. One particular one was he and I were selling Channel 100 set box tops. They were like HBO at that time. And we would go door to door, knocking on the doors, and we would laugh and see who had the most doors slammed in their face, and the surprises that came when somebody actually answered the door. The job wasn't too glamorous, but we had some great laughs about it. Later, we were both assistant coaches for San Diego State, where Alan initially helped the women's team before becoming an assistant coach for the men's team. I was with the men's team for 3 years at that point, coaching. The year together that we worked, we finished second in the WAC meet behind the national champions from UTEP, And then it's still later we worked together at San Diego Sports Medicine Center for a few years. Over the last 35 years, Alan's love for running never faded. He kept running. He started surfing more, but his true passion shifted toward studying and preserving local history, especially the history of Mission Hills. But above all, his greatest love was Janet. His relationship with her was very special. They were partners in every sense of the word, and I know this is a devastating loss for her, as it is for all of us who had the privilege of knowing her. If you didn't know, Alan always had a lot of opinions. Basically, he had an opinion about everything. Sometimes I agreed with him. Frequently, I didn't agree with him, but most of the time, I just shake my head. But that's what made Alan, Alan. He was never afraid to speak his mind or to share his thoughts with passion and conviction. Alan was a man of strong convictions, unflinching in his opinions, and passionate about his interests, whether his interests were track and field, Bruce Springsteen, or preservation. He made a lasting impact, and his memory will live on all of us who are fortunate enough to call him a friend. Alan, you will be missed more than the words can express. Thank you for your friendship, the laughter, the memories, and the lessons. We're all fortunate to have known you, and your legacy will endure. Thank you.
Oh, the one final thing I'll take credit for, I introduced Alan to Bruce Springsteen.
Hi, my name's Eliana Newell. Back then I was Ellie Garcia. I was honored to be part of the women's track team when Ellen was there. I have a lot of wonderful memories, like all of us do. I'll never forget, after doing our workout, we'd come back, pass by him, and he'd either be looking at us or smiling at us. And he'd have that little card with all the information, all our workouts in his pocket. And then the parties. And yes, I was one of the guinea pigs for his lab studies. They're good memories. I remember having to be on a swing, and they would dunk us in the pool to get our total body fat, which wasn't much. Most of us at that time had 10% body fat. So, yes, the parties. I remember a lot of the parties and the wonderful time we shared with him. And I just want to say thank you so much, and my sympathies to you. And he'll live on in our hearts forever. Thank you.
Hi there, my name's Cecily. I met Alan when he was at Palomar Cardiac Rehab, and I was just there for I was supposed to be the temporary supervisor for a summer. I think it was 2012, maybe 2011. And it was really funny because I've met very few people in my life that have that sense of humor and that sarcasm. And I understand it and I love it. And so, it's like, it was really fun coming to work every day with him. I don't know if everybody else really appreciated it, but we had a lot of fun. It was probably good that I didn't stay there, that it was temporary, but we had a lot of fun. And, what I really loved about him was, even though he talked, like everybody says, he talked about everything. And I was training for triathlons at the time, so we had the running in common, although I'm not anywhere near like he was. But, we had that in common. But he could talk and talk, but he would still hear what you're saying, and he remembered everything I said. Years later, he could tell me on Facebook, he'd remember conversations we have. I'm like, I don't remember any of that. And so I really appreciate that about him. One of the things was that it was so sudden, I was actually about to contact both of you and get together. And so I will miss him. But I do appreciate him. And I appreciate you, Janet.
My name is William Van Duzen. I do historic woodworking for historical homes for a living, and a lot of my experiences have been around the Mission Hills area, working with Soho and with the Mission Hills Heritage. That's how I got to know Alan. And, you know, over the years working around Mission Hills, he had quite a reputation for being adamant about historical preservation, kind of both good and bad with people, because not everybody appreciated somebody coming around to their job and looking at what they were doing and what kind of windows they were putting in and things. And I've even had clients that I'd go to a meeting and they'd say, "You know Alan Hazard. Do you know when he goes on vacation?" And maybe we could do this project when he's not here. But you know, having known him for many years, I really started to understand his sincerity. And about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was putting in a door on a historical property right almost across the street from Powers Plumbing, and the door didn't face the street, and I had made a historical replica of what I thought was there, but the original door was gone. I see Alan pull up right behind my truck, and he sees my truck, and he sees me, and he gets out, and he walks up the walkway, and I'm thinking, oh God, he's going to say something about my door, and he points at the window, and he goes, "William," he goes, there's a Hoosiers flag in the window there. Don't these people know that this is San Diego State country?" And I thought he was there about my stuff, but anyways, that's what made me think of all this, is all the speaking about San Diego State. So, thank you.
Well, hello everyone. I hope I don't cry. I'm Alan's cousin, Choo Choo. We grew up together, one of the Boston brats, and he was older than most of us. All the Boston brats loved Alan. He was older than most of us, and he was funny, and we would all go to Phoenix to visit our Boston grandma and grandpa, and all get together. It was a wonderful time. I remember him as a surfer. He loved to surf, and many of us loved going to the beach, so we love that about Alan. And I have been crying and praying for 2 weeks now. I'd like to give glory to God and bring the Lord into this. We're all connected, and heaven is getting pretty crowded right now. A lot of our family, his sister, my sister, our parents, everyone's getting in heaven now. And I've been talking to him a lot. I feel like he is here, and he does hear us. So I would just like to say, Heavenly Father, please accept Alan into heaven with the rest of our family. We will see you all when we get there. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you.
Thanks you all for sharing the wonderful memories of Alan, different angles of his personality and insights that we have of him now. We miss him even more. I guess this concludes the program, the formal program part of the event, and thank you again for being with us today. Please finish the refreshments, take time to explore the mementos and photographs up here, talk among everybody, and just hang out for as long as you like. We have the grounds for another hour or so. So thank you all so much for being here and celebrating Alan.